Bertha, it's such a pleasure to be here with you, and I want you just to answer some of the questions that I'm sure you've answered to me many, many times, but I just enjoy hearing them so much. How many brothers did you have?
I had 8 brothers. I had 8 brothers, and we were a baseball 9. And I love baseball.
And where were you born?
I'm just a little country girl. I've lived in big cities many of the years of my adult life, but I'm still a little country girl. I was born right out in the sticks in Sullivan County, about 7 miles from Monticello, in a wonderful, unusual place called Maryville Park. And my father was the first superintendent there in 1889, and he started working for them the year after they were organized as a club. And now he had a job, a full-time job, and a place where he could live. And he and Mother were married that same year in 1889, and they lived, and all of us kids were born there in Marywold. They lived there until for about 25 years before we moved to a wonderful place 3 miles away. But what a move that was, because we had hot and cold running water. Oh,
Yeah.
And in the other place, we didn't have any, and we had a bathroom, but where we lived before, now I'm getting way ahead.
Okay, that's okay. Go back and tell us how it was.
I'm 16 years old when I'm telling this now.
Uh-huh.
But I was born in February 16th, 1897, 3 years before the century. I was 3 years old when I came in with the century. And
how was it like living in the country as a little girl?
oh, it was, now as I look back, it was a wonderful place, because it was an unusual place, that Maryville Park. There were many, many gifted people, and many people of renown, worldwide fame, and my playmates, my first girl playmates, were Catherine and Evelyn Cohen, 2 Jewish girls, and Beatrice George. And
did they go to school with you?
No. They had their summer places in Marywold. That was just a place for people to come up in the city, from the city. You see, I was born in the horse and buggy days, and when the doctor came to deliver me, he had to come by horse and buggy, or no, it must have been the cutter sleigh, because it was in February, and he had to drive 7 miles from Monticello to come to our house and to deliver this little girl. And I had 3 older brothers, and I was the 4th child and the only girl.
Oh, that's right. I've forgotten that.
Yeah.
Were you spoiled?
No, everybody says, oh, you're spoiled. I had to fight for my rights, and I had to stand up for my rights with these boys.
Yeah, I suppose.
And
what school did you go to?
a little one-room country school, Black Brook District number 3 it was called, and it's still standing there. When I go up anymore, it's still standing there, but now it's a club for hunting and fishing and things like that.
What subjects did you take in school?
Well, I went to the grade school in this one-room country school, and we had geography, reading, writing, arithmetic, and reading and geography, and physiology.
Physiology, wow.
And I think I learned a lot more in physiology and geology.
Now, in the books that you read, what were
Geography, did I say geology? Geography and physiology. I get twisted up at 98 in my speech.
I know you enjoy reading, and of course now it's a little bit harder.
No, not geology, geography.
Geography, that's what you said. What books were your favorite when you were younger?
Oh, well, I did have many opportunities to read. My cousin used to send me those little books like Little Women and Little Men by Louisa M. Alcott, and then we had some books in the house, and one of those Elsie books that was very common in those days, I had that. And then my brother, my oldest brother, was a very great reader, and he had a lot of boys' things like the Frank and Dick Merriwell, and I read all those things, and Wild West.
Now, what was your high school days like?
Well, when I finished grade school, I went out to Monticello, and as I say, those were the horse and buggy days. And this Joe Thompson had a little country store right at the entrance of Marywold Park. It isn't there anymore, and he's gone, of course, and there isn't any, but he had a dairy farm. He had a lot of Holstein cows, and he used to go to Monticello every day with his milk to take it to the creamery. And so when I went to high school, I went out on Monday morning with him to Monticello. Then I stayed with an aunt, my mother's sister, and family, and they had children, and I stayed with them all week and came down on the train from Monticello to St. Joseph, about 10 or 12 minutes, and then ride, and then walk from the station over through the woods at 5 o'clock at night. And in the winter, in the fall, October, it could get very scary coming through those woods when it got dark. My mother used to send my 2 younger brothers next to me. She used to send them to meet me, and they were so glad to see me, and I was so glad to see them. They met me about a mile from home after I'd walked 2 miles through this scary woods and this long country road, and they were so glad to see me, and I was so glad to see them, because they had to wash and dry the dishes when I was away, and now they wouldn't have to do it over the weekend.
Now, how did you decide what college, when you wanted to go to college?
Well, I'll tell you, before that, I think I should say that when I went to this grade school, or one-room country school, when I went to this one-room country school,
well,
the one-room country school, this school was used for all the community activities. Whenever they wanted to do anything, or plays or anything, or block socials or whatever, it was always held at the little schoolroom and the one-room country schoolroom. And we didn't have any Sunday school, and we didn't have any regular church. But sometimes an itinerant preacher would come on Sunday afternoon, and it would have to be at the little schoolhouse. And I remember one time when I was about 6 or 7 years old, going with my mother to the school for one of these preaching services, and I didn't remember anything the man he said, but at the very end, he seemed like a youngish man, and he said, and he leaned forward and said, "You ought to give yourself to Jesus. You ought to give yourself to Jesus." And I sat there, about 6 or 7 years old. Nobody knew what I was thinking, but I thought, well, if you ought to, that's what I wanted to do. But nothing more was said about how you gave yourself to the Lord. And I never thought to ask my mother after we went home, what does it mean to give yourself to Jesus? So I began doing little things around the house, and I would always, from that time on, I would always think, well, Jesus sees me, Jesus sees me. And I lived with that thought for years. And my mother, she couldn't tell us that we needed to be saved and how to be saved, but she was saved. And she sang from her heart all of these hymns in her work around the kitchen. I don't know how my mother did the things she did with a big family she had. And we sometimes had pie and cake, and I don't know, and everything had to be done the old way. No hot and cold running water, just the big tank on the back of the big range and a big tea kettle, always with hot water. And
did you heat by wood or coal?
What? And wood. It was always wood. And anyway.
Okay, we got you through grade school. Now about high school, we got there. About the college now.
Oh, well.
How did you decide, and what did you take there?
Well, when I finished the grade school and went out to Monticello, I graduated in 1915, and they had a 2-year training course, a training school, where many of the girls and some of the boys would go into that after they graduated, would go into that, and then that 2 years training would qualify them to go out to these country schools, one-room country schoolhouses, and teach. And I think my father thought I would do that, but that didn't appeal to me, to teach reading and writing and arithmetic. And so I was always happiest when I was active, very active, with my brothers. I would wear them out playing baseball or that. And I tried to do everything that they did, only do it better because I was the girl, you know. And so.
When you went to college, then what did you do?
So then I got magazines, and I looked up where some schools were for physical ed. Now, the physical ed had not come in for women yet, and it hadn't much for the men, but hadn't come in for women. But that was just about the time they were beginning to put physical education in the schools, in the public schools. So I found that there was a Savage in Massachusetts and no, Sergeants, and Savage in New York, and the New Haven Normal School of Gymnastics. So I chose the New Haven Normal School of Gymnastics, and that's where my father, because I was the only girl, sent me and paid my way there. And so when I finished at that New Haven Normal School of Gymnastics, I taught up in Oneonta for 2 years. And well, there were a lot of other teachers, one that taught French, and one taught domestic science, and one taught music and other things. There were about 6 of us for our first teaching year. We stayed there 2 years, then we all left, and this Helen Craddock, the one who taught in the domestic science, she was very gifted and did beautiful handwork and beautiful embroidery. And she said, "Bertie, you ought to be doing something like this." I said, "Me, with a baseball in one hand and a glove on the other." But I finally did. Oh, they had such a beautiful shop where you could get pieces. And so I got a lovely linen dresser scarf, and it was all punched through shot through the birds with holes, and you had to sew those up, and then do a beautiful. Well, it was done so well that the other teachers, they thought I didn't do it. They thought Helen did it. And well, I don't know. Helen seemed to like me, and I felt very flattered that she would like me. She was a lovely person. And when we left Oneonta, I went down to the city, New York City, and I stayed with a cousin, and I worked at the Hospital for Bones and Joint Diseases in doing corrective gymnastics and massaging. We had that at school too in New Haven. And but 1 year, that was 1920 to 21, and 1 year later I went up to the country where my folks lived at that time, and in Sullivan County for a vacation. Well, away from the hubbub of the city and in the quietness of the country life, I had plenty of time to think. And one day I took a good look at the inside me, and I didn't like some things I saw. And I said, "Bertha, you're a sinner. You need a Savior." And I looked away to Jesus, and the most wonderful peace came to my heart and life. I couldn't have told anybody, "Oh, I'm saved, I'm born again," but that's what happened. He changed my whole life, because I went back to the city, and after about a month or so, I thought, this isn't for me, and I quit, and I went back to the country. And then then I was marking time for quite a while. And this Helen Craddock that I had
It helped you.
yes, she was madly in love with Charlie when I was there, and she married after we left Oneonta, and she married, and he had a little business, a grocery store up in the Adirondacks, and eventually in 1922, well, the oil boom in the early 1920s, the oil boom was on in Casper, Wyoming, and they left and went out to Casper, and he had his grocery business out there. And so when I quit and went up home and just was marking time, I had a letter from her, and she said she knew I wasn't doing anything right then, and she said, "Come on out and spend the summer with me." And she said they had taken up a homestead, and they would have to live on it for 2 months to prove claim to it. And I think she had visions of her living out there all alone all day while Charlie was in Casper at the grocery store. And so I said, well, I'm going west. So I went, to make a long story short, I went west. I went out, and I went out to Casper, Wyoming, and I was there in the middle of July and while I was with her, she saw that I had my Bible and other reading and a paper that my aunt had given me that was religious, and she said, "Bertie," and she began to cite some things I did to help people in Oneonta, and she said, "I think you would be good in missionary work." And I said to her, "Well, Helen, it does appeal to me, but what would you do? I don't know anything about the Bible." Oh, I forgot to tell the few times I went to Sunday school when I was taking my music lesson when I was about 9 or 10. And I forgot a lot of things.
Oh, you remembered a lot of things?
No, but when I was about 9 or 10, I think my father thought because I was the only girl, I ought to learn to play the piano. So he got a second-hand piano, and I can see the name on it, R.M. Bent, and he had a place in the Marywold, and he was a manufacturer of the woodwork, and this other man, Strouch, that finally bought a place, he was the internal maker of pianos. Well, anyway, my father got a second-hand piano, and I would have to go on Saturdays 3 miles to that railroad station, St. Joseph, on the O&W, and go up to Monticello, and then go to take my music lesson for 50 cents.
Do you still play the piano?
No,
Well,
I
what are
haven't.
some of your hobbies now?
The Bible and recitations. and I didn't begin any of those recitations until I was in the 80s.
Not until your 80s? That's when you started doing the recitations?
That's when I started memorizing those things.
Well, I remember the time, Miss Moore, you asked me, do you think
Well-
I could memorize scripture?
Well, I'll tell you how I happened to do it. When I came to Port Jervis and at the First Baptist Church,
Mhm.
Mary Ellen,
Yes. And BMA, Bible
And-
memory.
the Bible memory,
And let me just say, remember the time you said to me, or you asked me, do you think I could memorize
well,
the
you had
scripture?
memorized
I had
the-
memorized, and I said to you, if I can do it, anybody can. And so what did you do? She memorized, what, 105 the first time? All at one sitting?
Well, no, I didn't do it at one sitting. I recited it at one sitting.
Well, that's what I meant.
But I asked you, I remember they had all the literature for the different groups and the adult on the back table. And I thought, well, if I do this, I'll have to have Head Start like the children do for kindergarten. And so I began copying off each week for several weeks before I got my book. And
Yes, and then
and then I kept memorizing it. I would go back and say the next verse, and when I would add another verse and memorize that, I'd go back and say all of them. And when I came up to the second week, I would always go back and say the others. And when I got through the whole book, I had the whole thing. And that's the way I did it.
I know.
And so,
Also, wasn't one of your favorite pastimes was swimming and canoeing?
oh yes,
Uh-huh.
oh yes.
And I remember when you were involved with our youth group at the church, they were kind of afraid to let you go diving off the board and that sort of thing. And before they got permission, you had already been in the water. And the canoeing, and not canoeing, rafting.
Well, I went with Mary Ellen for 3 different years down the Delaware
Right.
in her little rubber raft.
Mm-hmm.
And the third time I did it, it was in August the 16th of that year, and I was just 86 and a half that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Mary Ellen, when she brought me home, all afternoon, when you don't go swimming from one year to the next, an all afternoon on that river and the hot sun, and you knew it. And I knew I was 86 and a half when we got through. And when she brought me home, I said, Mary Ellen, I think this is the last time I'll be going down the river with you on your...
Well, that's because you didn't stay in the raft. You got tired of just sitting and you went swimming, right?
Well, we didn't stay in the... We would get out and swim until we came to the raft. Then we'd get back in her boat until we went over the rapids. Then we'd get out and swim, and that swimming all afternoon in the hot sun. I knew I was 86, and when she brought me home, I said, Mary Ellen, I think this is the last time I'll be going down the river with you on that rubber raft, because I'm exactly 86 and a half.
Well, we were just talking about that last night at one of our small group meetings, and you may get an invitation to go down the river in her fiberglass canoe this year.
Well,
So keep yourself in shape.
She never asked me again.
Well, not yet.
So-
She hasn't, but
so
she.
I never went, or I might have weakened, but I don't think now at 98 I would.
Now, what we want you to do now, Bertha, because I remember in our talent show, this is when your readings came out, your memorizing.
That's
and
when I was in the 80s.
Right.
After,
And here all
well,
along.
now I'll tell you how I happened to give those readings. I went to prayer meeting, And Mr. Foster was urging everybody to sign up for talent night. And so I timidly spoke up and I said, well, could some of us who have no talents at all, could we come and see and hear the other talents? Oh, some of the people, they sang so beautifully and they played instruments, different instruments, piano or harmonica or violin or flute, and other people did beautiful handwork, and they had some beautiful, well, somebody did a beautiful quilt and cushions and things, and one man did a clock, and that was Mr. Kenneth Coots. And so I said, could some of us come and see the other talents and hear them? And Phyllis Foster sat right in the pew in front of me that night, and she turned around and said, well, why don't you give a reading? And I had never given a reading in my life. And then I said, well, I had just memorized in Bible memory. After you've been in it for 5 years, you can memorize different books like 1 John, Philippians, James, and 1 Peter. And I memorized 1 John. And I said, well, I guess you wouldn't want me to hear me give all of 1 John, would you? I thought that would be. And when I went home, I thought, well, why don't you give a reading? You've had all these years at Bible memory. And then in the 1930s, I heard Edgar A. Guest in person, and he wrote so many poems, down to earth, and I heard him give in Kansas City a whole evening's readings of some of his poems. And the one, and I had a little booklet by him, but I had moved around so many times I had given that away, and that had this poem of the boy in his stomach. And so I thought, well, maybe I should give a reading. And I thought of that, and I went home, but I didn't have that booklet, so I went down to the library, public library, and they had everything else, but they could not find that boy in his stomach. And they said, well, they could send away to one of the other libraries and get it for me. I said, no, I won't have time. So I went back home and I copied off some of his others, which I had given other times. And then I thought, when I went home, I couldn't be satisfied with whatever the other ones I had copied. And so then I thought, do I dare? I had written some poems myself, and I thought, do I dare give them? And so I gave 2 of my poems, and I never told who the author was. I always like to tell who the author is if I know when I give a reading. But I had just put up in a little booklet, and I had given it out to some of my family and of poems that I had written. And so when I gave those 2.
Well, are you going to give one now?
You want me to
Yes.
give them now?
I want you to give one of them now.
Well,
Okay.
when my mother died in 1937, I just stayed home because I had always felt if either one or both of my parents ever needed me, my place would be home. So I just accepted it, because my father would be alone. My brothers were all married and had families. So that year, I was going through a real trial. And in December, this poem came out.
Doing the one that you wrote, do the one about getting old first. That's one of our favorites. Okay, go ahead.
You tell me I am getting old. I tell you that's not so. The house I live in is all worn out, and that, of course, I know. It's been in use a long, long time, and I'm not surprised that you think it's getting rather frail. The color changing on the roof, the windows getting dim, the walls a bit transparent and looking rather thin. Foundations not so steady as once it used to be. My house is getting shaky, but my house isn't me. These few short years can't make me old. I feel I'm in my youth. Eternity lies just ahead, a life of joy and truth. I'm going to live forever there. Life will go on. It's grand. You tell me I am getting old, you just don't understand. The dweller in my little house is young and bright and gay, just starting on a life to last throughout eternal day. You only see the outside, which is all the most folks see. You tell me I am getting old, you've mixed my house with me. And this was written by an old lady of 88 who by name was Mrs. Dora Johnson. And she didn't know me and I didn't know her, but I felt that this poem was written just for me because I can relate to it by in the first two verses, and I can relate to the last two verses because of this experience that I had had in 1921 when I was saved.
Bertha, that was wonderful. It's my real favorite one.
Well,
no, this is another. All right.
When I was young, my slippers were red, and I could kick my heels right over my head. As I grew older, my slippers were blue, and I could dance the whole night through. Now I'm old. My slippers are black. I walk to the store and puff my way back. How do I know? My youth is all spent. My get up and go has got up and went. But I really don't mind very much when I think with a grin of all the grand places my get up has been. No, I don't know who wrote it.
Okay, Bertha, now do the one that you wanted to, that you wrote.
It's the valleys, Lord, the valleys. I walk so slow. Oh, no. It's the valleys, Lord, the valleys. So wide, so deep. Where I stumble, Lord, I stumble. Oh, let me hide. On the mountains, Lord, the mountains, so near the sky, I breathe the clear atmosphere, so pure, so dry. But the valleys, Lord, the valleys, I walk so slow, yet I know it's in the valleys that one must grow. And some complaints, yes, Lord, complaints escape my lips in the valleys, Lord, the valleys I make my slips. On the mountains, Lord, thy mountains, so deep, so wide. So I run so sure. Well, I didn't get that last verse, but now
You did a
then
wonderful.
that was in December 1937. Now this other came 3 months. I was still battling through this problem and trying to make it come out my way. And then in February, this little snatch of a poem kept coming to me, running over and over in my mind. Pass under, pass under, pass under the rod. And it kept going through my mind. Pass under, pass under, pass under the rod. And I thought I knew the booklet where it was written, and I could not get the rest of it. And I went and got that little booklet, and I couldn't find it. And then I thought maybe it was in Streams in the Desert by Mrs. Charles Cowman, who had been a missionary with her husband, and he had died, and now she was writing books. And she wrote several devotional books, and for a whole year, and this Streams in the Desert for a whole year. And I thought maybe it was in there, and I got Streams in the Desert, and I searched January, February, March, and I couldn't, and I came to the August 4th reading, and that caught my attention. It said it was on praising the Lord and
So you wrote this.
praising God. And the other missionary was in China, I think, and he had received bad news from home, and he could not rise above it. And his name was Frost, and he went to a mission station, and he saw on a placard across the room, "Try Thanksgiving." Well, he thought he had tried everything else, and he began praising the Lord, and his whole burden lifted. And I was going through this thing, and I said, "Lord, I don't know the answers, but I want it to come out your way." And when I did that, a wave kept going down through I think I had yielded the last thing I was hanging on to, and I had read about this before, but a warm wave kept going down from my head right through my feet, and I kept praising. I was in a spirit of praising and adoring the Lord, and I wanted to go to bed. It was about 10 o'clock that night when I was reading this, and this happened, and I wanted to go to bed to see if it was there the next day, and it was there day after day, the spirit of praising and adoring the Lord. And
that's how your poem came.
And so then I wrote this poem, and it's written in the form of a psalm, and it's entitled "Release." And it's I called it Psalm 1938 because it was written in 1938.
Right.
Blessed is she to whom the Lord hath brought release. She kicketh up her heels in joy. In glee, she lifteth up her heart unto the Lord. Yet, hear this paradox. Inner peace and quietness sit deeply within. And with peace indeed that passeth all understanding hath she been anointed. And new songs burst forth upon her lips, and old songs are brought to mind. And oh God, how wonderful art thy ways, and how infinitely far beyond the finite thou art. Yet, here another paradox, how infinitely close to the finite art thou, or else how else couldst thou hear our earnest prayer? And when we're in the valleys, oh valleys, where art thou now? And what doth the Lord do with the valleys when he removes them? Surely they are swallowed up in the infinite. And that's it.
Oh, Bertha, this has been just a joy, and I just thank God that I know you, and I'm just so thankful that I was invited to come to interview you.
I'm so sorry that
You don't want to be sorry at all. You've done a wonderful job in letting us know what a wonderful life the Lord has given to you.
Yes, I give him credit for that. But there were many things I left out when I went to school.
Perhaps we can
when I
have
went
another
to New
one.
Haven.
Perhaps we can have another one. Until then, thank you so much, Bertha, for doing this for us.
Well,